What up, though, everybody? Meet Stokes here. Welcome to episode 2 of the GOAT Debate Podcast. So glad that you guys are joining us on this lovely evening. With me, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, the producer extraordinaire, Mr. Tremendo's GOAT. Like that intro, Darius Brown. What's up, man? How you doing?
I like that. It was very stellar of you. Very stellar. I'm good, man. I'm ready to go for this debate. I'm ready, man. I've got no more words. I'm ready.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Those of you who checked out last week's episode where we debated the greatest sports movies, you can check that out on our YouTube page. You can check that out on any podcasting platform pretty much that's out there. You can find the Go Debate Podcast. So be sure to check that out. We appreciate the support. But tonight we're going to get into this great debate, The Last Dance. This Chicago Bulls documentary that's on ESPN is kind of taking the world by storm because there's not very much these days that can take the world by storm. We're kind of, in this shutdown phase, if you will. But The Last Dance, the documentary of the 97-98 Chicago Bulls, has taken the world by storm. So many different discussions and debates as it pertains to that team and some of the goings-ons with that team during that last season. And so it made us ponder here at the GOAT Debate. Of all the NBA championship teams, which NBA championship team is the greatest? And that is what we're going to debate tonight on the GOAT Debate Podcast. But before we get into any of that, Darius, we got a promotion tonight. Is that right?
Of course. We've been thinking, and I've been seeing this, been seeping into my brain as I'm watching The Last Dance. I keep seeing these ads for these $9.99 boneless wings from Buffalo Wild Wings. It pairs great with basketball. So I thought, why not give away some of these great $9.99 wings? It's not sponsored by any official company. This is coming straight from the GOAT Debate. So to find out how we can go ahead and give you some of this, some cheddar to get some of these wings, we'll announce it right before we announce the number one GOAT of all time for NBA championships post 80. So all you got to do is stick with us until right before we announce the number one GOAT, and we will tell you how to go ahead and enter. It's not clickbait. We're giving away $9.99. We're just asking for 3 simple things. And then, of course, your Cash App, so we can Cash App you the money. That easy. So stick tuned.
Yeah, for sure. Great little promotion. Get you some chicken wings. It's, a good time, man. Good time. Lovely time. So, NBA champions. Let's lay out the groundwork or the criteria for how we came up with this list. So we're talking about NBA champions post 1980 to now. So the last 40 years. Of course, if you listen to our episode last week, we kind of gave you a breakdown of how we come up with these rankings. We kind of do a composite of my rankings, Darius' rankings, as well as the rankings of our tribe, our group of listeners that check us out. And we tabulate all of those votes, come up with a composite ranking, and that ranking is what we give you guys here on the GOAT Debate Podcast. So, without further ado, as we do every episode, before we get into our top 5, we talk about the first 2 out. Those 2 teams here, in this case, teams that we're kind of giving a shout out to, an honorable mention. And let's start with a team that is personally near and dear to my heart, being that I am a native of Detroit, Michigan. This is a team that I absolutely love, and a team, by the way, who Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls pretty much roasted on these last couple of episodes of the Last Dance documentary. So an honorable mention, or one of the first two teams out that did not quite make our top five, is the 1989-1990 Detroit Pistons. This was the second championship won by the Detroit Pistons. They won also in the 1988-89 season, but this was the second championship back-to-back, 1989-1990. The Detroit Pistons defeated the Portland Trail Blazers in the NBA Finals in what we like to call the 5-game sweep. Actually, Portland, if I'm not mistaken, may have won game 1 of that series, and the Pistons, or maybe it was game 2, and then the Pistons won impressively, I should add. Back then, the NBA Finals was the format for the finals was you played 2 at home, 3 on the road, and then 2 back at home. So it was the 2-3-2 format. So the Pistons won game 1, lost game 2 to Portland. Games 1 and 2 were in Detroit. So they go back to Portland with the series 1-1, and the Pistons win 3 straight games in Portland. So quite the impressive run for the Pistons. It was not only their second NBA championship back-to-back, but it was also their 4th consecutive trip to the NBA Finals, which within itself is an impressive feat. So shout out to my boys, the Bad Boys, one of the greatest teams of all time. I don't care what anybody says. We're gonna talk about them, I think, again a little bit later. Hint, hint. But shout out to the 1989-1990 Detroit Pistons, back-to-back NBA champs. Do you have anything you want to add, Mr. Brown? I see you frowning up over there. You sound like you might have a little problem with my Pistons, man.
With these Pistons, I mean, they squeaked. Well, they didn't quite get in, but they squeaked into just being on the podcast. That is, but I mean, they had their glory. Isaiah was the Finals MVP. Dennis Rodman was the defensive MVP coming in to that Finals, and as you mentioned, they were the 3rd team ever to win back-to-back championships. Celtics and the Lakers being the other 2 teams. So
okay, impressive. Celtics, Lakers, Pistons. Come on.
Yeah. So I mean, they did well. They did okay, but they're not the GOAT. Clearly, okay. Why they're one of the first 2 out. So they did good, fine. Just not great.
Fine. What other teams go to 4 straight NBA Finals? I'm just saying. Yeah, but anyway, I know, later on we might get into that. But 1989-1990 Detroit Pistons didn't quite make our top 5, but they were one of the first 2 out. Our second team to get that honorable mention that didn't quite make our top 5 list is a more current team, and we were and a team that a little controversial because of how they came together, right? The linking of all of these superstars to make one team, but it worked. And the team that is our second honorable mention, if you will, is the 2012-2013 Miami Heat. They didn't quite make our list, but they are an honorable mention here today on the GOAT debate. Darius, what can you tell us about this great team?
I mean, they had an amazing run, 66-16 that season. They defeated the Spurs in 7 games, which,
amazing series, great series.
Yep. And they were a great team. Spurs were second in the West at that time. But with, Duncan and Danny Green and young Kawhi Leonard, Tony Parker. I mean, it was an amazing roster that faced that trio that you said that stacked up so it was just a great series, and didn't quite make the top 5 on our list, but a good team nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, the Heat, with LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, they were excellent. This was the first of two consecutive meetings between the Heat and the Spurs in the NBA Finals. They would go on to play each other in 2014 as well, and we know actually the Spurs won that series. So they kind of had a little mini rivalry, if you will. But yeah, you got to shout out the Heat there. I know our homeboy Shane, who's a Miami Heat lover, is
Yeah.
probably very appreciative of the shout out to the Miami Heat. If I'm not mistaken, LeBron James was the MVP of that series. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure LeBron was the MVP of that particular NBA Finals. In fact, I think he probably was MVP for every championship he won. He won in Miami. So Miami Heat, 2013 Heat, uh, not quite on the top five list, but deserving of an honorable mention nonetheless. So now we move on to those teams that did make the list of the greatest NBA champions of all time post 1980. And we're going to start at number 5, right at the top of that start date, if you will. This was a team, a great team that was led by a wily veteran and a young upstart rookie by the name of Irvin Magic Johnson. So coming in at number 5 on our list of greatest NBA champions is the 1980 Los Angeles Lakers. Darius, what you got for us on the Lakers? The Lake Show. This is the beginning of the Lake Show.
The beginning, the very beginning, and as you mentioned, the young Magic Johnson, he was the youngest player to log a triple-double in the playoff game, 13 points, 12 rebounds, and 16 assists. So, I mean, he just coming right off the top, showing you that he was about to be a GOAT with that performance right there. But, I mean, you talk about that was the Lakers. That was while Magic was the MVP of the finals, they had this small guy by the name of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who just happened to be the NBA's MVP that year. And guess who was on the other side of the court in this epic battle? He's the number 2 runner-up in the MVP race that year, a guy by the name of Dr. J, which somebody from the NBA was throwing a little shade on their list you were telling me today.
Yeah, Kendrick Perkins. I don't know what he was thinking. There was a list that came out today of the top 5 small forwards of all time by Kendrick Perkins, former NBA player, now analyst, and that list did not include the great Dr. J. But yeah, man, this series was really a coming out party for Magic Johnson. He was a rookie. He actually ended up playing center. I know it's talked about a lot, but he actually played all 5 positions, in this series. And he was the MVP, as you stated, against a great Sixers team who would, go on a couple of years later and actually win an NBA championship. So this was a great Lakers team. It was the start of what really would be, the dominance in the 80s, that rivalry between the Celtics and the Lakers. They would kind of alternate to win several NBA championships in the 80s. There were a couple of teams that threw some wrenches in that, but for the most part, the Celtics and the Lakers kind of dominated the 80s. So there you have it, the 1979-1980 Los Angeles Lakers, the number 5 team on our GOAT debate list here today. And then moving on to number 4 again. So we're taking it back, and then we're coming back current. Taking it back, coming back current. We did that with the honorable mentions, and now we're doing that here with the teams that actually made our list. And coming in at number 4, one of my personal favorite teams in this new era of NBA basketball, if you will. This was another team that added a star very controversially after losing the championship the previous year. They were already a great team, and they just added one of the top 3 players in the league in Kevin Durant and got even better. So coming in at number 4 on our list of the greatest NBA championship teams of all time post 1980 is the 2016-2017 Golden State Warriors. Now, Darius, I'm gonna throw it to you, man. I got some stuff to say about this team, but lay some facts on me when we're talking about, you know, Chef Curry with the shot and Clay and Draymond and Durant. They had a great squad.
They indeed had a great squad. You take a look at that playoff run. They only lost one game that entire playoff series, which was to the Cavs in the finals. I believe during the season they were ranked maybe the number 1 and the number 1 offense, and I believe the number 2 defense. Which, when you hear about Clay and Steph and Durant, you're thinking threes and dunks. You're not thinking defense. But that is the year that Draymond got his Defensive Player of the Year award as well. So you talk about them putting together the super team. Bob Myers was Executive of the Year, for the NBA, and then Kevin Durant, closed it all up, put a nice bow on all that talk about getting the super team. You got to produce, and Kevin Durant was your MVP of that finals. As they, you gotta remember, this is a Cavs team with the great LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. It was a big deal to get Kevin Love as they shipped off what a lot of people were thinking was a young superstar. That was a controversial decision to bring in Kevin Love, but it ended up working out in the long run because they did end up getting a championship, just not this year.
Yeah. So a couple of things that were impressive about Golden State's run this particular year. You kind of alluded to it. You said it earlier. They lost. I think they went 16-1 in the playoffs. They went through the entire Western Conference undefeated. So they beat the Portland Trail Blazers in round 1, which, nothing to sneeze at. I'm losing having a brain fart here, but Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, they were younger, but still a formidable Portland team. Then they go to the conference semifinals and sweep Utah, and then in the conference finals they take care of a team that has won championships and been historically great throughout the last 20 years in the NBA, in the San Antonio Spurs. So they sweep those guys, and that was still when the Spurs had Kawhi. I think Kawhi might have gotten hurt, if I'm not mistaken, in that series. He had an injury or something like that kind of sidelined him a little bit and really gave Golden State the edge. And then, of course, they get to the finals. They play Cleveland. Cleveland gets a game, but Golden State pretty much, dominates that series. A year after winning 73 games, breaking the Bulls record for most wins in the season, and then coming up short in the championship, they just reload with Durant. They end up winning 67 games the next year, which is an impressive feat within itself. And then they go on to, of course, win their second championship in 3 years, and then of course we'll go on the next season to win again. So probably the team that is closest to being a dynasty in this era of basketball, if you will, in the Warriors, and definitely a great team, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we're plowing through.
We are plowing through.
We're plowing through this list of our greatest NBA champions, and now this is where I get excited, man.
I think this is where it comes to a halt.
This is where it comes to a halt. I don't think so. Again, folks, we got to point out real quick. We have this composite ranking where again we take my rankings, Darius's rankings, and the rankings of our tribe, our listeners. And I just want to point out, first of all, the 13 Heat who were honorable mention, they actually got the second most votes by our listeners, known as the tribe. And then this next team, they tied with this next team that I'm going to talk about. Now, actually, I take that back. They did not tie. They tied with the 90 edition of this team. But the next team that I want to talk about is my all-time favorite NBA champion. 1988, 1989, Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys. The Bad Boys, one of the greatest teams of all time. Darius Brown is over there rolling his eyes. He's hating on my boys. But this team, let me tell you how bad, no pun intended, they really were. Coached by Daddy Rich, a.k.a. Chuck Daly, one of the best coaches of all time. The general manager, Jack McCloskey, put together a great team. We're talking about Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, John Sally, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer, James Buddha Edwards. Midway through the season, they make a controversial trade. They trade Adrian Dantley, who was one of their top scorers, to Dallas for Isaiah's homeboy and one of his closest friends in real life, Mark Aguirre. But Mark Aguirre came in, was a great six-man for us, did his thing. Who else am I missing?
Rick Mahorn.
The microwave, Vinnie Johnson, one of the greatest role players, bench players in the 80s, no doubt. He could come in, he was instant offense. This was a team that had to overcome Darius. Listen to this. They had to overcome Larry Bird. They had to beat the Boston Celtics. They had to defeat Michael Jordan in the conference finals. And then in the NBA finals, not only did they beat the LA Lakers, they swept the LA Lakers. Yes, Magic Johnson got hurt. Everybody said, oh, Magic had a hamstring injury. Magic got hurt, but they were going to lose anyway. Definitely. The Detroit Pistons, 88-89 NBA champs, one of the best. They come in at number 3 on this list, on our list today. Come on, what do you got? Because you hating on this team. You don't think they deserve to be on this list. Clearly, the tribe has a lot of sense. I definitely, they were going to be on my list. But what do you got to say, man? Let me hear it. You got stats and numbers and all this stuff. Let's hear it. Let's go.
Well, beyond all the stats and the numbers, right? You mentioned a key factor. Game 2, Magic Johnson goes down with the hamstring. He tries to come back in Game 3, only plays 5 minutes. On top of that, the Lakers lose Byron Scott, and he doesn't play at all, right? So their 2 starters are gone. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how the Lakers were undefeated in the playoffs and rolling until their 2 guards go down. Name another team that could go into the finals and lose their 2 top guards and be okay. Name any team. You can't do it. So
listen.
We talk about how. Yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Make your point.
Because I was just trying to say, you try to say how great they are. They had. Let me give some roses out. Real quick. Pistons were 63-19 coming into the playoffs. They had an amazing run. They were fueled by
Yes.
Amazing. It's amazing, right? And they were fueled by last year, the 87-88 finals where they lost 3-2, right? So they had all kinds of motivation. I believe I have my ears correct. They have the motivation, so they lose in the finals, and then the next year they're coming in and they're like, boom, we got to get this done. They make the trades happen. They have a great season, and then it's all murked up and clouded. I mean, you look at Magic. He had the most assists in history for the playoffs. I mean, he was on a roll, and they were up until the point he got hurt in Game 3, and then he had to go down and in and out. So I think it's clouded. Maybe they make the list, Stokes, but number 3, when you sweep injured, depleted Los Angeles Lakers. Oh, hold on. Let me see.
Listen.
Yeah.
Listen. Mm-hmm. Let's point this out. Let's lay out a little history for those that may not know. The year before, when the Lakers were at full strength, they were done. We got robbed in that series in Game 6. A phantom foul call on Bill Laimbeer in the final seconds of that game sent Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the line. He makes 2 free throws. The Lakers, I think, win that game by like 2 points or something like that. That game was in the bag. The Pistons were going to beat the Lakers the year before at full strength. So Magic injuring his little hamstring and Byron Scott not being a factor, first of all, that wasn't going to stop the inevitable. It was the Pistons' time. The Lakers were coming down after dominating the 80s, right, and dominating the West.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Okay.
You're talking about Magic Johnson was the MVP of the league that year.
Okay.
So not having the MVP, it didn't matter?
Okay. I'm not saying that it didn't affect – it didn't matter, but the Pistons were going to win that series because the previous year – okay, we could say in the year before that, Isaiah Thomas's ankle injury was the reason why the Pistons didn't win the championship. Because in Game 6 of that series – Isaiah gets hurts his ankle. He has a Superman type third quarter in Game 6 and scores like 20-something points in the quarter on a bum ankle, exerts so much energy that he's ineffective in Game 7, and therefore the Lakers go on to win and win the championship. So Isaiah was hurt the year prior. Magic was hurt the year they won. It's sports. It happens. Don't downplay. First of all, don't downplay my boys. That was their what? Their second straight, or no, that wasn't their second straight trip. I think that was their first trip to the finals, if I'm not mistaken. But in any event, they proved their mettle by going on the next year and winning the championship, showing they were absolutely the best team in the NBA. Right? And so it happens. Injuries happen. Magic was hurt. The previous year, Isaiah was hurt. The Lakers won. This particular year, Magic was hurt.
Did Isaiah play in that series?
He did play.
Okay.
He played.
Just checking.
But his ankle was hurt. Game 7, he didn't play. Game 7, he hardly played. Which is when they needed him the most. But I digress. You're trying to diminish the championship of one of the greatest teams of all time. Listen, I don't care what Michael Jordan gets on The Last Dance and says, and Horace Grant and all those bitter little Chicago Bulls guys. I don't care about any of that. This team, they were rough. They roughed guys up. Listen, that's how the league was back then. Everybody roughed everybody up. The Lakers and the Celtics played like that. Nobody says anything about that. But, the Pistons go slap a couple guys around, beat up, the golden child and Michael Jordan, and then it's a problem. But that don't take away the fact that these boys was 2-time champions and they played great basketball. They were a great team. They were deep, and quite frankly, they were a buzzsaw at that point. There you go. Joe Dumars, who, by the way, for those great listeners out there, my all-time favorite basketball player in the history of the NBA. Again, native Detroiter. I am. Joe Dumars wasn't, but I'm a native Detroiter. Joe Dumars was the MVP of that series, and deservedly so. He had an excellent series, and helped carry the Pistons to their first championship. Man, those were the days. I was a young lad in the city of Detroit, and the parades and the excitement around the city. I remember after they won the championship, going outside in my neighborhood, and there were people climbing on light poles. Like it was insane. It was insane. I mean, come on. It's Detroit, man. It's a little crazy. People were climbing on light poles. There was like a KFC sign, like a Kentucky. Back then, it was Kentucky Fried Chicken. It wasn't KFC. There's like a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket. Somebody was like dangling off of this thing on 7 Mile in Detroit. It was a wild time. And they're personally, listen, man, they deserve to be on the list. I'm glad they're at number 3. Darius is hating, and he's going to throw out some other stats later on that I'm sure is going to further diminish my boys, but I'm not going to let that hate ruin what is already a great episode of the GOAT debate. So Detroit Pistons, 1989 NBA champions, the first of 2 consecutive championships. Number 3 on our list of greatest NBA championship teams. And now coming in at number 2, Darius. I've been talking a lot about the Pistons. I was excited. I was amped up. So I'm trying to calm down a little bit. This is a team that is, in some people's minds, believe it or not, the greatest, or they have been called the greatest team of all time, greatest NBA franchise, NBA team, not franchise, but they are from one of the greatest NBA franchises of all time. But this particular version of the team has been called one of the greatest teams of all time. They were dominant, man. 67 win regular season. They had a squad, man. And speaking of my Detroit Pistons, who we were talking about previously, these guys, there was no team. Listen, okay, later on, I hated the Chicago Bulls because of the rivalry with the Bulls and the Pistons were so intense. But prior to that, this team gave me nightmares. I will admit this on a podcast, on airwaves. This is one of the few times this team is responsible for one of the few times that I have actually cried after a sporting event. I was so devastated the year that they beat the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. I want to say it was the year after this team we're going to talk about. It was 1987. The Pistons were in Boston. They were getting ready. I mean, they were winning this game in the final seconds. It was like 8 seconds left or something crazy, maybe less than that. Isaiah Thomas throws an inbound pass that gets stolen by Larry Bird. It gets thrown to Dennis Johnson for a layup. We go on to lose that game, lose game 7, and Boston goes on to the NBA Finals. That was in 87. That game brought me to tears. I was destroyed as a young Detroit kid. I was literally crying. But the team the year before that, the 1985-1986 Boston Celtics are regarded by many to be the greatest team of all time. I know that is definitely up for debate when we start to talk about the GOAT here in our episode today. But this was an amazing team. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge, their entire starting lineup averaged in double figures. They were as dominant of a franchise as a team this particular year that you could think of in the NBA? What are your thoughts on all those guys?
Man, the Celtics. How do you put it in words how great they were? It's kind of difficult because to understand what they went through was amazing. You know, you mentioned the names on there, Hall of Famers up and down the bench. You have Kevin McHale got Sixth Man of the Year. Larry Bird was MVP that year. Lakers were the number one team in the West coming into this finals. That had Magic Johnson and Kareem and James Worthy and Byron Scott. And the thing about this, I was just watching this finals earlier, and you mentioned about an inbound pass that was intercepted that caused the Celtics to go on further in the playoffs. Well, that happened in the finals here as well, where a young James Worthy, who was coming off the bench at this time. I think it was who was it? Wilkes was injured, and so this is game 2. Wilkes is injured, so that forced James Worthy to start and get a lot of time. He was still young. He ended up leading the game in scoring for the Lakers, 29 points that game, but he made one crucial point where all they had to do is hold on to the ball. He got nervous, tried to throw it across, it got intercepted, they put it up, and Magic said from that point they never really recovered. He coming into that, they thought they were the better team, they thought they were great, and then this mistake happened and it kind of shook them all. So it was just a crucial mistake. And it went on, and the Celtics they went on to win in 7, so it was not a blowout by any means. Great series, but that was like a pivotal moment, game 2.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Darius threw out some great stats. That was the '84 Celtics, though, but it's okay. The '86 Celtics beat the Houston Rockets in the NBA Finals.
Wait. Oh, I thought the '84 was made the list. They did not make the list.
No, now they did. But the '85, '86, but the '84 Celtics were damn good too. But
I like how you just let me go on to this whole epic story.
No, but talk about a young James Worthy. I was into it. I wasn't gonna cut you off, man. I was gonna let you run with it. But I mean, they were good. But the team that actually made the list, it is a Celtics team. But it's just the '85, '86 ones. But that's okay. They beat. I didn't even realize, to be honest with you, that there was a year in the '80s where the Lakers actually didn't go to the championship. The Houston Rockets were the team that the Celtics played in the championship this particular season. They beat them 4 games to 2. This was also the year that the Celtics played the Bulls in the first round of the playoffs, and Michael Jordan had he scored 49 points in, I think, game 1, and then he came back in game 2, and of course, infamously scored 63 points in game 2. All in losses, by the way. Michael Jordan is the only guy who everybody praises him for scoring 1 million points and still loses the game, but I'm not bitter about that. So I actually had to look up, man, this Houston Rockets team, because I'm like, who did they have? Because did they have Olajuwon yet? I guess it was 85, 86. Yes. So they did, because Olajuwon and Jordan came in the same year. So if Jordan played in that first round series, they definitely had Olajuwon then. But I'm like, what notable players did they have? Their leading scorer was Akeem Olajuwon. He averaged 23.5 points per game that season. Their second leading scorer was Ralph Sampson, who was a good player. He was at about 18.9. Lewis Lloyd was at 16.9, and then you had John Lucas Jr., who averaged about 15 and a half points per game. He would go on. John Lucas would go on to be a great coach in the NBA. Some years down the road, and his son John Lucas III had a cup of coffee in the NBA as well. But yeah, I did not realize that in '86 the Celtics actually beat the Rockets in the finals. I didn't think anybody came out of the West but the Lakers in the '80s. I mean, that's all I remember. I don't even remember this Rockets team.
Yeah, it's unfortunately very forgettable. That was Hakeem when he was just known as Hakeem. He didn't have the H.
Yeah, he wasn't Hakeem yet. He was still Hakeem.
Yeah, but I mean that was like the original. I don't know if I could say original, but I think of Twin Towers. Think of David Robinson and
right. Yeah,
Tim Duncan.
But him and Sampson, I think they did kind of call them the Twin Towers or something like that, right? They did.
Yeah. Because that's what propelled them. People sleep on Ralph a little bit. He was an all-star MVP just in '85. So just the prior year, he was rookie of the year 2 years ago. Before that, so he was young and healthy at that time. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that folks forget about this Rockets team. I'm a Rockets fan, and and I think that's why, in part, I blocked out that you were trying to propel the team. I don't want to talk about this. You think I want to talk about them losing a championship? Yeah, so I want to talk about them winning championships, Stokes.
Yeah.
So
what's the story? What's the story behind your Houston Rockets fandom? I mean, because you're not a Houston native, right?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Not at all. It's a good question. So originally, I'm from South Carolina. We have no team. So
right. So do people in South Carolina root for the Hornets?
Yeah, that was the Hornets, but they were bad. They weren't any good. So the only time people would go from South Carolina to Hornets game was when your boy Michael was in town.
Right. Sure.
People would travel because it's about 4 hours away from where I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, is Charlotte. So I had no allegiance. I was a big Charles Barkley fan, so I followed him from Phoenix to eventually Houston, but I got on the Dreams bandwagon as well. So I was a Olajuwon fan as well. So that's
gotcha. Okay, all right. So
when he got
So because you didn't live in a city with a team, you kind of just adopted a team, and the Rockets was that team.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, all right, makes sense. All right, well. 1985, 1986 Boston Celtics, number 2 on our list of greatest NBA championship teams. And as we tend to do every episode, we got a couple things to do here before we go into our GOAT, our greatest NBA champion team of all time. First, do we want to go promo? Do we want to talk about the promotion? Let's go ahead and talk about that. Go, take it away, Darius.
All right. As we mentioned at the top of the show, we love wings. We think they're perfect for pairing. So we know that there's a company out there, Buffalo Wild Wings, that's doing a promotion. This has nothing to do with them. They are excluded from this. This is something coming from the GOAT debate. But we want to cash app you $9.99 so you can get your wing on, so you can eat it while you're watching The Last Dance or listening to a future episode of the GOAT debate. All you have to do is like this episode, subscribe on YouTube, and leave us a comment telling us what your GOAT team is that has a championship post 1980 in the NBA. So that's all you have to do. Like the episode, subscribe, and then comment what is the GOAT team for the NBA past 1980. And what we will then do is we will take everybody who has fulfilled the requirements. I will put it on a randomizer, and I will draw a name, and then I will contact you and let you know that you won. So make sure you give us your Cash App. We will Cash App you the $9.99 so you can get your wings and enjoy it with The Last Dance or possibly the GOAT debate. It's just that easy. No paid entry is required.
Cool. All right. Well, there you have it. Enter. Throw that info in, and you're automatically entered. Subscribe on YouTube. Comment with your best NBA championship team of all time, and of course, like this episode on YouTube. We appreciate the love and support. And so, before we get into our GOAT, the greatest NBA championship team post 1980 of all time, we like to talk about snubs. We like to talk about teams that didn't make any of our lists, but were great NBA champions and should probably get some love. And Darius, I'm going to start it off. I'm going to give you a snub that was voted on by the tribe, by our group of listeners out there. We appreciate it. They voted a team in the top 5 that after the composite rankings didn't quite make our list. And it's a team that definitely deserves some recognition. You kind of talked about this guy earlier. He was kind of the one of the leaders of this team. It was one of the few Eastern Conference teams, along with my beloved Detroit Pistons, to actually win an NBA championship in the 80s that was primarily dominated by the Magic Johnson-led Lakers and the Larry Bird-led Celtics. But this team actually defeated the Lakers in the NBA championship in 1983, and that team was the Philadelphia 76ers. I think they were a snub from this list. They made my personal list. They were in my top 5. This team was great, man. They went 65-17 in the regular season. They had Dr. J, they had Moses Malone, they had Bobby Jones, they had Maurice Cheeks at point guard. They had Earl Cureton, who actually was from Detroit and played many years for the Pistons. But they had a really, really good team. They dominated the Eastern Conference. They dominated. They swept the Knicks in the first round. They beat the Bucks 4-1 in the second round. Or I'm sorry, in the conference finals, because back then there were only 2 rounds in the playoffs before you got to the championship. There was just the conference semifinals, the conference finals, and then you made the championship. So you didn't have to win 3 series to get to the championship. You only had to win 2. So they only lost 1 game the entire playoff run. So they sweep the Knicks, they lose a game to the Bucks in the conference finals, and then they swept the Lakers, playing the first 2 games in Philly, and then coming to LA and finishing the Lakers off in the championship. They were coached by Billy Cunningham, a legendary coach, and just a great team overall. So the tribe snub this week is the 1983 Philadelphia 76ers. Anything you want to add to that?
Nope. I mean, a little bit. You summed it up really well. They were stacked. Both teams were stacked.
Yeah.
Lakers had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar again, little guy who he led the playoffs in points, and Magic Johnson led the playoffs in assists. And then you have on the other end, Moses Malone, who was a defensive stud. Led the playoffs in rebounds and went on to get the Finals MVP. So it was a great pick by the tribe. Just quite didn't get in there with the composite, but one of the best of all time.
All right. And I think this particular moment is one you've been waiting for. So I'm going to let you have the floor so that you may talk about the team that you feel like was a snub, a team that you felt like should have made this list but did not make it. And I think I know where we're going with this, but take it away, sir. The floor is yours.
There's no secret at this point where I'm going with this. Okay. I'm going to 1994, 1995. The team that should have been on this list, but was snubbed. I'm trying to keep it calm, Stokes. I'm trying to keep it calm for the people. Led by the great Hakeem Olajuwon.
He had the H by this point, right? He
had his H. He was full dream power, man. The 94-95 Rockets were definitely a snub as they went on to defeat the great Shaquille O'Neal and the Los Angeles Lakers. Not only did they beat them, they swept them 4-0. I know you're saying, let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. It is the year that Jordan wasn't there. But in fact, he was there. He played. He came back. Baseball went on strike. Let's address this because people want to talk about he only playing 19 games that season. All right. This is the same
facts. It's true.
Right. It is true, but it is not a strike against the Chicago Bulls because he only played 19 games. Let's talk about
it's not a strike against the Rockets.
It's not him either because you're kind of sliding Michael Jordan because he only played 19 games. He's not the great Michael Jordan. So let's talk about Michael Jordan for a second. The guy who at age 50 was whooping up people one-on-one. NBA players at 50. So you're telling me a guy at 50 who can handle his own against NBA players who's been training. He wasn't on the couch eating Doritos. He was attempting to play professional baseball. He was in shape. So let's not discount the fact that that he's coming in late as if he's like a bum off the street. He's not a bum off the street. He's the greatest player of all time. So let's move on there.
Who wasn't in basketball shape. He had been playing baseball.
He's the greatest. He can play bums. Great players at the age of 50 and hang. Okay? You telling me in his prime? Because he didn't play.
It's different.
No, it's not. It ain't different. It ain't different because, there's two sides to that coin. He didn't play a lot, but he also did not play a lot, meaning he had no wear and tear. He didn't have the injuries of a grueling back-to-back NBA season. He was rested. He was in shape from playing baseball, so he was ready to go. All right, let's look past that.
Okay.
Because there's more. There's more. Name me. Go ahead. I want you to think about it. Take your time. Name me another team that went on to win the championship that defeated the number 1 team in the West, the number 2 team in the West, the number 3 team in the West, and then the number 1 team. Listen, the Magic were no slump. They were number 1 in the East.
Yeah, because Jordan was gone. But okay.
Okay, so what? Okay, they would have been number 2 if Jordan was at his prime, but it doesn't matter. But the facts are the facts. They beat the 1, 2, 3 seed in the West and the number 1 seed in the East and get no love. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So, this is a team that overcame a horrible regular season. They had chemistry issues. They just finally got Clyde Drexler. They traded for him in February. So they took a while to get their stride. So, yeah, they didn't look that great all the way. But once they finally got to where it counted, they demolished the best teams in the league. So, come on. You got to show them the love. That's why I put them up. No, they had a run like no other.
Man, listen. They won 47 games in the regular season. Now, granted, they won the championship the previous year, right? They beat the Knicks in the championship. That team was a 58 win team They were number 2 in the West that year. Seattle was number 1. And then they come back the next year, win 47 games. They're 6th. They are 6th in the East. I mean the West that year. They are a 6th seed. Now, granted, a great feat to beat the 3 seed in round 1, because if you're the 6th seed, you play the 3. Then they go on to the semifinals, and in a 7-game series, they beat Phoenix. Phoenix was the 2 seed, as you stated, and then they beat San Antonio, who was the 1 seed, 4-2 in the conference finals. So, yes, great job by a 6 seed accomplishing what they accomplished, right? But in the annals of NBA history, when you talk about great NBA championship teams, you are the only person on planet Earth that I have ever heard mention the 1994-95 Houston Rockets. Partly because, listen, it's not fully their fault, but they were completely overshadowed by Michael Jordan, who dominated the 90s. And they won in the 2 years, or the year and 3/4 year that Michael Jordan was not in the league. So when you put all that together, they're just not a memorable championship team. I know you love Houston. That's your adopted franchise.
This is insulting to everybody who played. Shaq was the NBA scoring champion.
He was. Listen, Hakeem Olajuwon took him to school. Hakeem Olajuwon took him to school in that NBA Finals series. Listen. Shaq admits that himself. He got taken to school in that series, no doubt. Houston had they had good players. They had Olajuwon. They had Kenny the Jet Smith. They acquired Drexler. They had Mario Elie. I mean, they had some
Robert Horry, Sam Cassell. You could go on and on. They were solid.
They had some good players, no doubt. But top 5 NBA championship team of all time? Nah. No. Listen,
Hakeem was on a roll. He set the most amount of blocks for the playoffs that year. He was a beast. Do not play with me. Show me my respect.
Listen, man. I gave you the floor and allowed you to speak on your snub without insulting you completely. So I did. I gave you some love in that regard. But it's your list. You have a right to have the opinions that you have, and so
Yes, real quick. How many games did Jordan have to play for it to be a valid season by him?
Well, he played 19, right? Plus the playoffs, right? So he played 19 regular season games. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Magic knocked him out. They beat the Bulls to was it semifinals or was it conference finals? I think it was the second round.
It was early. Yeah, it was early.
Yeah, I think it was the second round. But how many games? A full season, Darius. That's how many games.
Really? Really? Man, the goat of the NBA?
Yeah, man.
Keep a full season to be validated?
Okay. Ask me, answer this question. When he came back the next year and played a full season, what happened? We know what happened. He tore everybody out the frame and started the first of what was another three-peat. So yeah, man, he needed it's different sports. I get the point you're trying to make. Well, he was playing baseball, so he was already in shape. Yeah, but it's different. It's basketball, it's baseball. It's
2 months at that point.
Yeah.
2 months.
Okay, yeah, but yeah. But I mean, hey, listen, your list, I'll give it to you. So my snub, real quick before, and I'll try to be brief so we can get into this. The GOAT. I think most people probably know who the GOAT is now, but one of the teams that I had ranked in my personal top 5 that did not make the list was the first of the Shaq and Kobe era Lakers, and that was the 2000. I was toggling between the 2000 and the 2001 Lakers because although the 2000 Lakers, which was the first championship that Shaq and Kobe won, they had a great season. They were 67-15, which is remarkable. They were first in their division. They were first in the West. You know, but there's so many things about that team that makes them memorable. You know, they had some tough series on the road to that championship too. I mean, they went 5 games with the Sacramento Kings, who they ended up having a great rivalry with during those years that they were winning championships. It was kind of the Lakers and the Kings were going at it. The Kings, they met them in the first round this particular year, but in subsequent years would go on to meet them like in the conference finals and things like that, because that was when the Kings had Weber and Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic. They had a really good squad. And so they go 5 games. This was before the first round series used to be a best of 5. So this was probably one of the last years before they converted that to a best of 7. So they go 5 with the Kings. They beat them in 5. They handle the Suns pretty well. They beat the Suns in 5. And then they go on to have a classic series against the Portland Trail Blazers. And that game 7, with them being down, I want to say they were down 17 maybe in the fourth quarter. They were down big. And of course, the memorable play where Kobe throws the alley-oop to Shaq. Shaq dunks it with one hand and makes, the big eyes and the big face. That's one of the memorable highlights, in NBA history. And I remember the game vividly, watching it. And that was, like I said, it was quite the feat to come back from that deficit. And those Portland Trailblazers teams were really, really good. They were stacked. People want to talk about, super teams just came about when LeBron James teamed up with Bosh and Wade. Man, that Portland team had Rasheed Wallace, Scottie Pippen, Damon Stoudemire. I mean, they had a good team, and they were literally on the cusp of going to the NBA Finals, and the Lakers made that big fourth quarter comeback to win that game 7 in LA, and then they go on to play the Indiana Pacers in the NBA Finals, and they handled the Pacers pretty well. They won that series in 6 to get their first championship. So the 2000 Lakers were a great team. I was debating between them and the next year, 2001, mainly because that 2001 Lakers team did something similar to what that Warriors team we talked about previously did. They went 16-1 in the playoffs. They only lost 1 game that entire playoff series. But the 2000 Lakers, was a special team in that it was Kobe and Shaq's first championship together. And then just that memorable game 7 that they played in the conference finals against Portland. So the 2000 Lakers were my snub. And we can go ahead now and just talk about the GOAT, man. Who is the greatest NBA championship team of all time post 1980? We want to throw that caveat in because I know people will say there were some great teams in the 60s and 70s, but Darius and I weren't living then. so we're gonna talk post 1980, and of course, I think everybody knows where we're probably going. They were unanimous. They were on my list. They were on Darius's list. They were on the list of the tribe. I also should point out before we announce the team, I think most people know who it is. The 2017 Golden State Warriors were also a unanimous selection. So they made my list, your list, and they also made the list of the tribe, our listeners out there. So good taste, man. The people know what they're talking about. But the GOAT, the greatest NBA championship team of all time, I don't even think we need a drum roll. It saddens me to say it because I hate these guys personally, but the 1995-1996 Chicago Bulls, without a doubt, probably the greatest team in NBA history. Would you agree?
I do agree. It was the number one team on my list, and as you mentioned, the tribes. So, I mean, there's so many great things about that team, but I want to take a look at their opponents before we do. The Supersonics, coming into that, they had the highest record of any loser coming into the finals on our list, 64-18. That is a ridiculous record. That's higher than a lot of winners.
Sure.
Got during the season.
That's higher than your 45-win Houston Rockets team that you were talking about. Yeah, tell me about it.
Back to the Sonics. I mean, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, that duo is one of the greatest duos of all time. Gary Payton was the Defensive Player of the Year that year. And the Sonics, you speak about my Rockets, they knocked out the two-time defending champs to get there. All right. But they were the number one seed, so that was anticipated going into it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how great that Sonics team was, and it's just unfortunate how they dismantled right after that. They played one more season going into that next season. Sean Kemp was disgruntled with his contract, a la Scottie Pippen. If you take a look, I cut a video on why Scottie Pippen didn't have a horrible contract. Well, Sean Kemp thought he had a horrible contract and wanted out, and he ended up getting out, and he fell off and got fat and had drug issues and all of that. But before all that, he was throwing down some massive dunks. He was blocking people's shots all over the place. So I wanted to pay a little bit of respect to how great this Supersonics team was that the Bulls.
Yeah,
sure.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, they had a really, really good a good team, and if they were going against anybody other than Michael Jordan, they probably would have won. They probably would have won the NBA championship. They had like you said, Gary Payton and Sean Kemp are probably one of the most underrated, duos in NBA history. Sean Kemp is. When Sean Kemp was Sean Kemp, he was probably. I remember me and my cousin, man, who I kind of grew up with, kind of like a brother. He would watch tape of Sean Kemp like constantly because my cousin was, pursuing basketball and things of that nature. And that dude at a time was probably the most athletic basketball player I had ever seen. That dude could jump out the gym. Extremely athletic. So they had Peyton, they had Sean Kemp, they had Nate McMillan, who of course now is a coach, but he was a great defense. They had a great defensive team. McMillan was a good defender. Gary Payton was a elite defender. Eric Snow was very young at the time. He was a great, he would go on to become a great defender. They had Detlef Schrempf, who was, a great shooter, a great player. They had Hersey Hawkins was the shooting guard. So Peyton and Hersey Hawkins were the backcourt. And they had Irvin Johnson was a big. They brought off the bench. Sam Perkins, another. They had a really, really good team, man. And like I said, anybody but the Bulls would have got that work, and they would have lost. But I'll let you finish your thoughts on the 96 Bulls, but you're right. You paying some homage to the Sonics that year. They were a very good team.
Yep, and led by Coach Carl, right?
George Carl. Yep, George Carl.
George Carl. Yeah. So studs all around. But we're really not here for them.
Yeah, we're not. We're here for the other guys. Whatever.
The other guys. Your hero. the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
I mean,
By 0. Go ahead.
All right, you talk about a stacked team, right?
Yeah.
Sixth man of the year, Tony Kukoc.
Yeah.
Coach of the year, Phil Jackson. MVP of the All-Star game, the league, and the finals, Michael Jordan, who
ridiculous
finally got that full season under his belt, so he was ready to play finally. And once he did, good God, look out. They were the first team to win, first and only team to win 70 games and a championship.
Okay. And the championship. Okay. There you go.
A lot of us kept including the Warriors in this debate, but they lost the championship battle.
Yeah, 70. They broke the Bulls' regular season record, but then they didn't finish the job. They lost in the championship. Yeah.
Yep. So it had to be excluded the list. But I mean, I was just watching that was a very physical final. Rodman was getting in people's head, got Sean Kemp thrown out of the game. I mean, they were going back and forth. The physicality was there. It was just a very fun series to rewatch. And the Bulls, the greatest of all time, that started the second three-peat. And it just took off. They are, the greatest basketball team in history.
Yeah, I mean, it's debatable about their greatness, but
it was debatable, but we have solidified it, Stokes. Accept it.
Right.
It's no longer debatable.
I guess that's the purpose of this show, right? To kind of settle these differences. They got revenge on the Orlando Magic after losing to them, the previous year. They end up sweeping them in the conference finals. So, a full strength Jordan, full season under his belt. They took care of the Magic in 4. They beat the Knicks in 5 in the semifinals, and they swept the Miami Heat in the first round. So they really only lose. So they lose 10 games in the regular season. They lose 3. They almost lose a third of the games they lost in the regular season in the playoffs, which, but increased competition, things of that nature. But yeah, definitely, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. Definitely one of the, if not the greatest team of all time.
And we mentioned earlier about you said about Michael Jordan carrying the scoring load and just kind of dominating. To put this in perspective, it's one of the only only finals matchup where he didn't go totally crazy. He still averaged 27 points a game, right? But if you put that only, but if you put that in perspective to his other runs where he was 93, he was at 35 points,
right?
92, 34, and 98, 32, and 31. So his production was down slightly, which is crazy to say because those are the top 10 scoring efforts of all time.
Yeah,
but
probably speaks a little bit into the Sonics and some of the defensive players they had. I mean, you can't completely stop Michael Jordan, right? You only can hope to contain him. And so, so 27 points a game is nothing to sneeze at for sure. So, yeah. So 95, 96 Chicago Bulls, I think most people would agree that they're probably the greatest NBA championship team and maybe even the greatest team of all time. Well, that's it, man. That's our list. The greatest NBA champions of all time post 1980. I think it's a pretty good list. So to recap, number 5, the 1980 Los Angeles Lakers. Number 4, the 2017 Golden State Warriors. Number 3 and number 1 in my heart, the 1989 Detroit Pistons. Number 2, the 1986 Boston Celtics. And the GOAT, the 1996 Chicago Bulls. Well, we want to thank you guys so much for listening to another edition of the GOAT Debate Podcast, episode 2. Thank you guys for hanging with us and checking out today's episode. Don't forget YouTube, guys. Don't forget, go to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, GOAT Debate. Comment on this episode who you think is the best NBA championship of all time, NBA championship team of all time. Like the episode, and you will be entered into a random pot for a chance to win some wings, man. Some Buffalo Wild Wings. We're not sponsored by them, but we just want to treat you guys to some chicken because, you know, we like you. So be sure to do all those things on our YouTube channel. Also, be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at GOAT_debate. Also, search the GOAT Debate Podcast on Facebook. We're on Facebook as well. But before we sign off, Darius, we want to talk a little bit about next week's episode because we got something interesting on tap.
Man, so next week's episode will be live. So you want to follow us on Facebook. So search the GOAT Debate on Facebook here. I'll also drop our link in the description so you can follow us there. But next week, we're going to have this amazing debate that we came up with. Brandy versus Monica.
All right.
Who was the greatest? Who has the greatest catalog? And what we're gonna do the little special. We've sent out the bat signal, and what we did is we got two super talented singers, and they are going to sing the catalog for us because this goes back to, I think they were like around 95 or so when
90s
came out.
90s for sure.
Yeah. So some of y'all might have forgotten some of the hits that they had. So we're gonna remind you with some live a cappella performances. Not by me.
And definitely not, as I said, definitely not by me. So yeah.
And Stokes, I will be taking Monica's catalog. Okay. And guess what? I'm bringing a ringer. Okay. So you better be ready.
Yeah, man. Well, you know, I know people who know people. So you know, I'm taking on Brandy's catalog. I have a great singer on tap to represent Brandy. We're going to take it back to 90s R&B. You guys have been seeing all of these battles between various artists and things like that on Instagram. So we're taking a little page out of that book, but with a twist. So our singers are going to come on with us next week, and they're going to sing not the whole songs, but some brief covers of some of Brandy and Monica's greatest hits. So next week's episode, be sure to check it out. If you're a fan of 90s R&B, you'll love it. Brandy versus Monica. It was a debate that we always had because they were, for a time, they were at the top of the food chain for female R&B. So they're going to go head up next week with a twist, with some great singing, and we're going to talk about their music, their catalogs, and debate who truly is the GOAT. Is it Brandy or is it Monica? I can't wait for that one. But we want to thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our podcast, whether you listen on Apple Podcasts, whether you listen on Spotify or Stitcher or any of the other podcasting outlets. You will find the GOAT Debate there. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all of that. We appreciate you guys tuning into this edition of the GOAT Debate Podcast, where we settle once and for all who is the greatest of all time, or at least we like to think we do. So Speech there signing off. Check you guys out next time. Peace.
Yeah.